Welcome, everybody, to Why Are You an Entrepreneur? The Trials and Triumphs of the Journey. I'm Maureen Edwards, the founder of 8 Simple Steps. And for those of you tuning in for the first time, or you're watching the replay, this is all about me bringing you rockstar entrepreneurs at all different stages of their journey to not only share their story, but why they're doing this, some words of wisdom, some best practices out there. So for all my small business owners who are in this journey too, you can pick up some bits and pieces, tips and tools to take the hard out of building your business. Tonight is no exception. In fact, I say it, I think, every week. I've got rockstar Melissa Bottorff Arey. Did I say that right this time?
Pretty close.
She is the founder of The Leftover Pieces. She's a podcaster and she is an author. And her story is one that touches my heart. So I want to introduce you, Melissa. Welcome.
Thank you, Maureen. I am so happy to be here with you. Thanks for asking me.
So I always start out with the same question. Why are you an entrepreneur? Can you share a little bit about your journey into this endeavor?
Yeah, I can. So I'm an entrepreneur because I'm a glutton for punishment.
Well, yeah, that's right. We all are.
That's the prerequisite, right? Because I can't work just 40 hours a week, all the things. I have been kind of a serial entrepreneur my whole life. I mean, I even look back into childhood and think of some of the things I did. But this particular entrepreneurial venture that I started, the podcast started 2.5 years ago. And that's what it started with. The Leftover Pieces, Suicide Loss Conversations is my podcast. And quite honestly, that was born from a need. I couldn't find the podcast that I needed. So in August of 2016, I lost my middle child, my 21-year-old son, Alex, to suicide very unexpectedly. He was away at college. He had had a few, what I considered or thought at the time to be normal stresses for a 21-year-old, getting ready to tackle his third year of college. And he was in a fraternity and he was in a rigorous academic environment. And he had gotten himself a little overwhelmed, but it seemed like normal overwhelmed to me. And we were very in contact, and he was home for 5 of his last 6 weeks. And then he went back, and 7 to 8 days later, he was gone. And quite honestly, I talk about being shattered, but I don't have any words that are better for it than it just shattered me. It cracked my world wide open. And I had to figure out what to do for a number of years, and felt quite lost, Maureen. I couldn't find the support that I felt like I needed when I couldn't read books because I couldn't concentrate long enough to read a book. I'd read a sentence or two and just stop and think, what in the heck did I just read? And so I turned to audiobooks and podcasts as a way to consume my information and to try to learn as much as I could and find comfort in all the things we need to do when we're grieving such a significant loss from such a complicated way to die. And I couldn't find the podcasts I needed. There were a few older podcasts with a few episodes in the world out there on suicide loss, but that was it. And so I just kind of 3.5 years in, having waded my way through the best I knew how, decided that there needed to be more hard conversations. There needed to be more awareness that grieving shouldn't be something that's as stigmatized as suicide and as mental health. And so it just kind of landed in my heart. And that's why I do what I do. It's grown to be more than that. It's grown to be, now I'm a master certified grief coach, and I'm training to be a funeral officiant and all of the things, but I also have support groups and I've written books. And so from the podcast grew, and I didn't know where I was going to go when I started. And when I started, this lends to the entrepreneurial journey, because when I started, it was just about me creating something that other moms needed and being able to provide a resource. And I remember saying, if I can help one mom, just one.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any plans to do some of the things that I do now, just because in my mind, I wanted it to be strictly organic reach. I wanted people to find me if they needed me. And in my innocence and ignorance and naivete that I had at the time about this world that I now walk in, I just thought that would happen. I didn't think about things like marketing and the things that, you tend to think about in other entrepreneurial ventures. And so it has changed for me over time, as far as how I approach it. And it's become a full-fledged entrepreneurial business that I hope to be doing full-time within the next 6 months to a year. Right now, I do it part-time I do it part-time.
Yeah, I don't think it's part-time for what I've seen, all the work going on. And so do you have that real job, the other part-time?
Yes. So the two full-time jobs is really what it amounts to, right?
It
Yeah.
does. It does. But your story is so hard because, and I get very emotional, and I've heard your story before, but every time I do, it hits me very hard. But your journey is how a lot of them start. Maybe not so tragically, but you see a need in a market that people need, like yourself, and there's a gap there. It's not there. And that's what entrepreneurship is about, saying, you know what, I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to fill that gap because it's needed. And it's a tough conversation. It's a tough situation. I want to ask you, what has been the greatest challenge in entrepreneurship? And is it because of the topic that is the challenge? So I'm just curious, what have you found, owning your own business has been the hardest part?
Well, it has been the biggest challenge that I have, and some of it's because it feels like the biggest challenge to me, is the marketing. And I use that word, so it almost feels bad coming out of my mouth because I don't feel like I market, at least not from a traditional pyramid or funnel standpoint that a lot of people would think of learning to be an entrepreneur, and you have all these systems you follow and all the funnels you do. Mm-hmm. And I have done this business, and I've done some of that for other businesses, other entrepreneur businesses, but if it doesn't fit or feel right in this business, everything I do has to be something that I feel is 100% authentic and right. And so I look at it as wanting to expand my reach and wanting to become more available to the people that need me. Yes. And that feels easier to talk about to me than marketing. How do I expand my reach? How do I become more findable? How do I become more searchable? Simply because I want those moms that need me, and it's not just everything I do in my community is for moms, the support groups, the classes, the trauma healing, the membership community. But the podcast is, and will, at least I foresee it remaining broader, just to suicide loss. So you can have lost a spouse, a friend, anybody in the podcast is relevant because I talk to people of all losses within the suicide loss world. But in my community, I'm specifically targeted towards moms because that's my wheelhouse. That's where my heart is. And so, yeah, that's been my biggest challenge, is knowing how to reach the people in an authentic way and not have it ever be anything more than making sure they know of the resources and that I'm here. Because I honestly don't want to try to sell something to somebody. That's not which is different than a lot of entrepreneurs. They want to, a lot of times, and I've been in that world before too, where you want to create the need for your product or your service.
Right.
I don't want to create any more need for this, period. I wish that the need would go away. But I know there's a need and I want to provide the help. So that's been my biggest challenge, is knowing how to expand my reach without it being something that isn't authentic.
Like creepy marketing that we talk about. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And nobody should be participating in that. But because the conversation and the people you're trying to help, I don't think there's any harder conversation that you can have with people than what you are doing. So I think you're 100% right. But I think entrepreneurs overall struggle with marketing. I think even corporations, I've been in both. They struggle with marketing to come across authentically. Where do you find, Melissa, I would like to know, what are you using to reach, these moms and get your word out? Are there certain platforms that you have found to work better out there?
Yeah, I have, and it will be counterintuitive to some of what you tell people,
Yeah.
because it is a different business than so many. But I have to find moms where they are, where they're existing and looking for support and looking for connection, if you will. And unfortunately, I say that because that's just how I feel about it. Unfortunately, a lot of that is like Facebook,
Mm,
because if you take a mom who's lost a child to suicide, by sheer age, she's going to be at least mid 30s. I wish I could say older, because if you age their children, that's still a pretty young mom with a pretty young child.
mm,
But at least mid 30s, if not most of the time 40 and up.
right.
And so when you talk about the age, which I'm definitely 50 and up, so if you talk about the age profile, that is just where a lot of them are at. That's where they're looking for, and there's a lot of groups.
Mhm.
The problem with a lot of the groups on Facebook is, that becomes a heap of mess. I just think there's a lot of drama on Facebook. I'll just call it for what it is. And so I avoided it for a very long time, just because I didn't want to be a part of that drama in this world. And I came to find that if I just did things a little bit differently, that I could. And so I say Facebook is what I use a lot, but Instagram is my main platform. It's worked the
Mm,
best for me. I don't know why.
mm,
I'm consistent on it. And it just has. Now that I have an email list, communicating with people one-on-one works really
mhm.
well, meaning sending emails and newsletters and things like that. But to this day, the podcast is still my number one way to connect with people. And it's been around for 2.5 years. I'm in season 4. There's over 100 episodes. Listener wise, it's in, I think, recently Kim made me celebrate that it was in the top 1% of all podcasts as far as how many people listen every week. So, but I didn't pay
Wow.
attention to any of that for a very long time, because it wasn't what I was doing it for. I wasn't doing it to be able to say I'm doing that. And it makes me it's hard for me to talk about. It was hard for me to attempt to celebrate, because I don't want
Mhm.
to celebrate this many moms needing to hear, this many dads, this many friends needing a place to find some way to feel like they're going to survive this. And that's ultimately what happens.
I can totally see where what you're doing, there is a little bit of a conundrum. You know what I mean? Versus maybe other people, obviously, who are not in such a sensitive, really tragic situation. And I think the hard part for me is, God, this is going to sound terrible. The epidemic of suicide, it's like, you're here at the right time, right? Isn't that what businesses, it's, the right time, the right moment, but how unfortunate that you had to be doing this and being able to help this many people. But the epidemic, I'm very distraught at how much it's increased. And I guess I'm going to ask you what it maybe, and maybe you can help me understand, but what do you think is kind of that root cause to seeing such an increase? And what should people be looking for or trying to fix this?
Well, there's not one root cause, but I will tell you that, I mean, you have to peel this back prior to the pandemic. We're just starting to see the numbers from the pandemic, and logic would say, some people might be like, why is she talking about the pandemic? Because during the pandemic, suicide skyrocketed. However, it was already at an all-time high in a lot of prominent age demographics before going into the pandemic. Alex died in 2016. That was well before the pandemic. Um, but we are just now starting to see the numbers, because they usually lag about 3 years, as far as reporting goes. And suicide still isn't reported as the way it should be. Many people don't don't end up with a suicide on a death certificate, even though it may have been a suicide. So the numbers are always hard to follow. But when you, and I think over the last decade that we've seen such heavy increases in spikes, you're looking at a generation. You have to point the finger at technology a lot, as much as I don't want to, as much as that's hard to say out loud.
Nope.
And studies are starting to emerge that are backing that up. I mean, I go on gut instinct, but then when I see the studies start coming out from Harvard and the different places that are doing good studies on this, it backs it up. It supports the fact that we have, this generation that has immediate accessibility to, watch us on LinkedIn, to do all the things that can be very good, but in the hands of a young forming mind and impressionable people, that anybody under 25 is extremely impressionable and susceptible and all of the things. And suicide has become an option, to be quite honest. I mean, our generation, I don't even recall thinking about, knowing about. That doesn't mean we didn't have struggles, but the stress in our world today is so much greater than what we dealt with when we were young. And then you add to it a supercomputer in every child's hand with access to everything, including bullying and all the things that occur by having these devices in their hands. And it's funny that you asked this, because I just recently, just like 2 days ago, read a study that says, and it was from Psychology Today, I think, and it said that the increase of when you see children that spend over 5 hours a day with a device, period.
Yeah.
The increase is as much as 20% more likely to consider or die by suicide than the children that spend less than 5 hours a day. And I say that because now that, you asking what you did, I suddenly think this is the possibility for some people that don't know that, some parents that don't know that, to more carefully monitor their screen time of their children.
Yeah.
And those children that are on less than 5 hours a day they're at about a 28% risk versus 48% and that's a huge difference for kids that are having all this screen time, because it makes them more isolated. It makes them more susceptible to messaging and bullying and all those things. The kids that are doing less are connecting face to face with their peers. They're playing sports. They're going outside. They're doing creative ventures, and it makes for a healthier mind and in a more discernible way to separate themselves from the things that, if they're isolating and on technology all the time, can really aggravate or even cause a problem that may not have been there before.
I'm glad you're bringing that awareness to people. I think you're spot on. I think you're absolutely right. So tell me, Melissa, what has been your greatest success so far in this entrepreneurial journey? But, is it a certain client, a certain mom? What has made you feel like this is so worthwhile doing this?
I don't have one single greatest success. I feel like the greatest success that I've had would be any single message I get from anybody that says this has helped. Period. I mean, just knowing, and it happens a lot. And every single one of the messages touches my heart. Every single one of them usually makes me cry, but that's okay. And just knowing that somehow them finding a connection that has somehow given them hope, that's it. That's my greatest success there. It's not the other things. Being an entrepreneur means you're in business, right? So this is the touchy, tricky part with the kind of business that I'm in. Anybody that's in a mental health forward business or this type of a loss and grief business, I think they struggle with the same things of, how do you charge people? I remember my husband asked me that in the beginning, how are you going to grow this to where you charge people for things? And it's hard. At first I said, how will I do it full time if I don't? And then I said, wait, we don't feel bad paying our psychologists to go, that we expect them to charge us something. And so I've had to get over that hurdle emotionally, because it is a heart-driven thing. My brain can absolutely separate them out and understand why anybody providing a service and spending their time and resources and getting educated and all the things I'm doing, how that deserves an income. but it's the balance of where do you put that. And I give an awful lot away. Sometimes my husband's like, and you're doing that too. I said, yes, I'm going to do as absolutely much as I can, without cost, and provide as many resources as I can, and then provide the ones that make sense because of the time investment or things like that where there's a cost, so that I can do this because I want to do it full time to be able to reach more people, period.
Right.
I
Right.
could keep my other job. I could go back to being a chef. There's a whole lot of things that I would love to do. I'm driven to do this. So there's a difference. So I just keep the loves, the things I love to do for hobbies now. And it's hard to say I enjoy this.
No, you don't. You do and you don't. That again, the conundrum, right?
It's fulfilling.
Yeah.
It feeds my soul.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say I enjoy this because I don't want to enjoy this. I take it very seriously. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy the company of many of the people that walk this path with me, because I do. And that's where that comes in, is I absolutely enjoy spending time with and getting to know these women. I absolutely hate the reason I know them, and they hate the reason they have to find me. And that's just part of that. I call it a duality. There's a lot of dualities in this world. Yeah.
I think, just hearing this, I can see where you are torn, but I said, you can't help as many people as you want if you don't charge. So look at it that way. If you do, you'll be able to multiply your impact, because you're just making such a huge difference out there. And I cannot imagine how fulfilling. I mean, we all think that our business is like the most important business out there, right? We're all making this huge impact, but at the end of the day, I think you're probably making the most impact of anybody who I've come across, because what you do takes a very strong person, and
or a very motivated one. That's the way I look at it. I mean,
yes.
The strong word also, and this, but the strong word becomes hard after losing a child, because when people tell you you're so strong, you think, I sure don't feel like it.
No, and you don't want to be. You're like, why do I have to be tested to be this strong? Like, what did I do? Right.
Right.
So you have scaled this company way past that podcast. Okay. So for other entrepreneurs out there, regardless of what your business is, it is all about adding to it. You're trying to add opportunities to get that reach out and to get that help out. Can you share a little bit about what you have added to your business and scaled this to get bigger?
Yeah, absolutely. So the podcast was a start and will probably always be what I consider the foundation or the anchor, because it's just a worldwide connector. And I have changed it a little bit, formatting. I've done some different things this season. I'll continue to add some different segments and do some different things, which keeps an interest level up. It keeps it up for me as well. I've written I've started my Facing Life After Suicide series last year, which was I talk about 3 spaces in this loss. I don't talk about stages. It's an archaic thought that we just work through these neat stages and then we're done grieving. That doesn't happen that way. But I have found the first 3 years of this journey to be fairly loosely predictable for most suicide loss moms, which again, that's what I work with outside of the podcast. And so I always call the first year survival, the second year hope, and the third year healing. And those are the 3 years that if you can make it through those years, you can then start to live this new life a little bit more intentionally. So I kind of exist to take moms through those groups. And so the survival series was written last year, which consists of a book that's a survival guide and a journal. And there will be a deck of cards that goes with it at some point. There's a funeral piece that I'm writing to go with that as well. But then the Hope series will come out this next month. And then by summer, the Healing series. And then hopefully by fall, maybe the cards will be a part of it, each set. So I hope to have all 3 of those out as well. So I've grown, and I have other projects planned I need to write my memoir at some point. I need to write the story of what's happened at some point. And so those will be things that come. I have the support groups, but I also have a membership community that there's more than just a monthly support group for those gals. Those gals are part of a membership community because they want more than once a month support group. They want more connection. They want deeper connections. So that membership community allows them to do that. So that's a growth space. I teach a trauma, how to heal your trauma, because I firmly believe that your trauma doesn't just heal. You grieve, and your grief changes naturally over time. Time doesn't heal anything. Time just passes. And as time passes, we learn how to live more successfully alongside of our grief. But trauma won't heal itself. You can't just you have to actively heal your trauma. And so I teach trauma healing. I am a certified trauma energy healer, but I do this from the standpoint of education on how to gain the tools and access to all the different therapies that are available to heal your trauma. So you can start to live in this new, I'm not the same person I was before I lost my son. We're not the same before our kids are born. Our kid's born and our life upheaves and changes. Yes. Our kid dies and our life upheaves and changes. That's not the one we ever anticipated or expected, and it's not the one anybody's prepared to walk us through. People are prepared to walk alongside of us when we bring a life in, right? And it's not necessarily the same when we are left with one of our children leaving. And so I also have, downloadables that I'm getting ready to put on that are healing modalities, meditations, things like that. So it's grown in that way. It's grown from the podcast to all these different resources that all fit within the 3 needs that I have found grievers have after this loss. They don't want to be alone, and this is super lonely.
Yeah.
They want to make sure their child is remembered, and that's the biggest fear the moms have, is that their child's going to be forgotten. We all have that fear. We think, I just want my child to be remembered. Our living children are still having their life. They're still creating their legacy. So I've created a legacy project that I do with moms to help answer that one. And then the other one is to have resources from the time of loss on. And so that's where the books fit in, and all the other tools, the classes, the things like that, so that I can answer those 3 needs, because that's just what needs to happen.
So can you tell people how to get a hold of you, how to get your book, how to inquire about membership or sign up? What is your contact information?
It's super easy. Everything is at theleftoverpieces.com. It's at my website. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on all those things as The Leftover Pieces, with the Leftover Pieces. But it's just theleftoverpieces.com, and they can find all of it very easily on that website. There's links for the podcast. There's links to go to find support. There's links for resources. And I think I've worked very hard to make it easy to find, if you get on the website, to make it navigatable, even through the brain fog that I know most of us grievers have. So.
And I did go to your website, and it's absolutely beautiful.
It's being improved even as we speak. The resource page has been kind of my neat, because as I added more, it was just becoming this monster, this of just so much. And so it's being cleaned up as we speak to be much prettier and more navigatable, because that's huge. I want to be able to provide, because if somebody finds their way to my website and they say, but she only helps moms, that resource page is where other people can find where they need to go for, if I can't help them, outside of the podcast.
Yeah, somebody else. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have that available. Mm-hmm. So one last thought. For entrepreneurs who may not be on this type of journey, but are very impact, mission focused, in that situation where it sometimes feels like, how can I be charging for this? We get a lot of people who are like ministry, and they have those type of businesses. What would you recommend to them as an entrepreneur who they may be struggling like you?
I think the biggest thing I can offer, besides don't do anything that is unauthentic, stay very authentic in everything that you do, drive it from your heart space, and that will be your guide. But the biggest recommendation I can think of is to find a community of other entrepreneurs that you can walk alongside. And that for me, even though a lot of times I feel like the redheaded stepchild in our group of entrepreneurs, because what I do is prickly and it's hard. And so a lot of people don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, which is part of what I'm trying to fight out there in the stigma.
Yeah.
But because of that, I also have found the uniqueness of entrepreneurship can be so lonely.
Oh,
And
yeah.
without a community, without, you're not going to the office. You don't have, I mean, if you are, it's in your bedroom or wherever, and you don't have a crew of people around you and a whole company and your office mates and all that to bounce ideas off. And most of the time we're wearing all those hats. We're the boss and we're the secretary and we're the
all of it.
fill in the
Yeah.
blank. And so without a community of people, we not only get in our way, but it's easier to slow down. It's easier to quit. It's easier to make mistakes. It's not that those things don't exist if you don't find a community, but they're easier. They're so much easier to wade through with a support system. And for everybody that may look a little different, but within these communities, you can find masterminds and you can find all sorts of things that keep you on the straight and narrow and doing things in a way that is not only ethical and moral, but productive.
Great advice. Great advice. And, you do need, regardless of what type of business you have, it is very isolating. So I 100% agree. Get a community of like-minded people who can understand what you're going through. Maybe not specifically a business like yours, but just the entrepreneurial part. So
exactly. And for me, being in this entrepreneurial community where I am kind of alone in that a lot of people are not, most of the people we associate with are not in the grief and loss space. You would think that might be a detriment. For me, it's turned out to be a positive thing, because I think if I was surrounded with other grief business, there would be a heaviness to it that I already deal with when I'm doing, the work with other people that have lost someone. So it has given me a space of being able to treat it like a business and not feel like we're constantly butting up against each other's sadness, which we would be doing if we were in heaviness, if we were all in this same type of business. So,
Melissa, I want to say thank you for joining us tonight. I know this is a hard thing, but you are dealing with hard every single day, and I applaud you for taking on something that very few people would do, and the impact you're making is huge. So I just wanted to say thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me on and letting me talk about it, Maureen, because I appreciate that a lot. To me, that takes a bravery in itself. Some people wouldn't want to talk about something that's hard to talk about. So I appreciate you giving me a place to talk about it.
My heart is with you. And I hope you'll come back and let people know, how you've expanded, your resources and your books and where your business is going next. And if you have made this a full-time endeavor and gotten rid of the other.
I will. I would love to reach out when that happens and say, Maureen, it's happened. Let's talk again. Yeah.
Yes,
that would be
please
great.
do. Please do.
Yeah, I will.
Well, everybody, that concludes our Why Are You an Entrepreneur? A little bit different tonight, but so incredibly worth it. I'm Maureen Edwards. And if you need anything with starting your business, building your business, scaling your business, please just reach out to me at 8simplesteps.net. You can go ahead and direct message me on all of the platforms you're watching this right now. And this has been a hard one for me, Melissa, but I just want to say, everybody out there, I think be kind to each other. Okay? Be kind. All right. Good night, everybody.